I think everybody's familiar with the scripture. Everybody could tell you where it's found. It's in the 12th chapter of Daniel. And it's a famous chapter because it's kind of an amazing thing that happens. This happens during the Babylonian captivity. I might be wrong about that, but it happens around 600 BC. Daniel is visited by an angelic being who tells him this story. I'm sorry? No, can you hear me okay? My wife is telling me that she can't hear me.
Not really. It's kind of, voice is not so strong.
How's that? Any improvement? Because I want to have my notes down here where I can see them. And I rested them on top of the computer, and it shouldn't make a difference, but apparently it does. Doesn't matter. Here we go. Daniel, 12th chapter. That amazing story. He is visited by an angelic being that tells him that at that time, this is about the last days, at that time shall Michael stand up, a great prince which standeth to the children of thy people, and there's going to be a time of trouble such as there ever was and never will be again. And you want me to slow down? I'm getting a lot of instruction from the other chair. So the chair over. Okay. Well, thank you. Anyway, many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake unto everlasting life and unto shame and everlasting contempt. And the part that we're concerning ourselves with now is that he's told at the end of this, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book even to the time of the end. Money will run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And many are running to and fro. Daniel was told this. You know, if you could take Daniel and place him at the end of JFK runway, have him watching an Airbus take off, he would be flabbergasted. Many are running to and fro. And knowledge has been increased. And if we were to say that we recognize that knowledge is on the increase, it would be like standing inside a burning house and saying that we feel warm. It's like completely a flood of information. Not all useful, not all true, but a flood of knowledge. One of the things that we need to recognize about knowledge is that, well, there are two things I'd like to mention very briefly. Knowledge is doled out to us by the Almighty, who opens the faucet as he sees fit. It's a long-term process, and he's not in a hurry. And the other thing that I want us to remember, and this is counterintuitive because the world tells us that we are developing, mankind is developing. We're getting more smart because we're more able, but that's not true. Early men were more intelligent than we are, but they had less information. You know, if you have a nice kitchen, but no food to prepare, you can't make a meal. If you're smart, but you have no information, that's not going to help you build airplanes or the kind of stuff that we do today. There's a methodology to learn. The divine syllabus approached on a basis that's very deliberate and very slow. You know, we only live the lifetime of a man. We want this to happen during our lifetime. But that's not how the Lord does things. He's doing things on his schedule, which is not our schedule. As far as this methodology that takes a long time, let me point out something. The scriptures that we are so careful to study were, think about this now, the period from the beginning from Moses to the end of the time when the apostles were there is about the millennia and a half to produce scripture. You know, so the Lord is not in a hurry about providing information for us. And if you think about where we are today with the Epiphany truth, and you go back to the beginning of the dissemination of the truth where Moses was writing in Sinai, and that's 35 years. So these things are happening on a scale that is set by the Almighty, not by us. And it takes a long time. And this methodology of learning we read about in Isaiah 28, 9th verse. Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Because we're talking about learning about the scriptures, gaining knowledge. Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. That's who gets knowledge and understanding. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. So this is how information is disseminated to us by the Almighty God. It's a long period, it's a long process. It's on His time schedule, not ours. And we assimilate it line upon line, precept upon precept. Now, this is not how we learn. I get these in the mail sometimes. These are the great courses. You can sign up to learn calligraphy or play the piano. You can become an expert right overnight to sign up for a course and learn something, and then you'll know it. But that's not how we are supposed to be approaching Scripture. It's a long, deep dive, a lifetime deep dive. You didn't arrive at this meeting because you took a Bible course, right? Nobody is going to involve themselves in a discussion like the one that we have because they went to a Bible college. My wife and I spent a year and a half at a Bible college. Didn't do anything. We learned nothing. So, the thing I want to mention now is that there's another book that we learn from. Another book where we are gaining, where knowledge is being increased. And it's not some other holy book, but it's the book of nature. And this is how the Apostle Paul describes this. Romans 1:8, 1:18 starts. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. For what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from His workmanship, so that men are without excuse. In Psalm 8:3, we read, when I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and stars, what is man that thou art mindful of, and the son of man that thou art visited? So, considering the sun and the moon and stars, the work of His hands, the greatest scientist by all accounts, it's arguable, but most people would believe that Sir Isaac Newton was the most brilliant human mind ever to appear on Earth. And if you investigate anything about Sir Isaac Newton, you might agree with that pretty quickly. And what does he say about this? I want to show you something. This is Isaac Newton's Principia. Okay, it's not interesting reading because it's deeply involving mathematics, many diagrams. After he finishes talking about the relationships, explaining how gravity works, and to such a finite degree that even today NASA guys use equations to launch distant space probes that work perfectly. This is how he finishes up his section about the sun, the moon, and the planets. I'm just going to read one sentence, it's pages of this. This is how he begins. This most elegant system of the sun, planets, and comets could not have arisen without the design and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. And this goes on for pages. So after he demonstrates that he's the master of thinking scientifically, he follows up by telling us how it all happened. So nature is the book of God's work. I want to cover two things. One is how this long-term process has revealed something profound and important in the past. And then I want to move up to how this long, drawn-out process is revealing something very important and profound right now, today. And check my time here. In 1519, spice was the oil of the world. Oil is the most widely traded commodity today, followed by what's next? Sugar? No, close. You're not. You're disqualified. You're coffee. Oil is number one. In 1519, spices were the oil of the world. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, black pepper, stuff to flavor your food, which was only available in the Spice Islands. There's little islands like in Indonesia, some tiny little spot where all this stuff grows, only place on earth. And the Europeans knew that. The desire for spices drove Europe's exploration of the world. They wanted to get spice. And everybody has heard the name of Ferdinand Magellan, but they probably don't remember much about him. But he was determined to find a western route to the Spice Islands. I don't know how he thought he was going to do that. And he didn't either. They used to have to sail all the way down Europe, all the way down Africa, down below Africa, around Cape Horn and out to the South Pacific to get spices. And Horn of Africa, dangerous place for a little bit. So he wanted to go the other way. So they left sailing west with 5 ships and 270 men. So they're sailing west, and then, hey, here they are coming back from the other direction. How did that happen? Right? Now, they sailed around the world. They didn't know that. Nobody knew how this all worked. Nobody knew what the earth was like. There were no maps. It took them 3 years. Only one of the ships came back. And out of 270 men that left, 18 made it back. They had shipfull of spice. And in an era where seagoing explorers kept exquisitely detailed logs, that would be your only way to find your way back. They were a day late. They were a day behind, but they might have to think that. So nobody knew what that meant. The world is round. That didn't probably occur to anybody for a long time. Here's the next thing that happened. This was, let me get my date correct here. So that was in 1519. Now, in 1514, you've heard of Nicholas Copernicus, famous astronomer, who published a book called On the Revolution of the Heavenly Spheres. He published his book in handwritten form and only gave it to his friends because at that time, this book explained that the Earth was actually not the center of the universe. But papacy claimed that Earth was the center of the universe. So if you wanted to claim otherwise at that time, that could cost you your life. So Copernicus was a little hesitant about publishing this book for 2 reasons. Believe it or not, the most important reason to him was he was worried he might be wrong about something. But I have a copy of that book. It's completely dense with mathematical formulas. It's not something you can read. It doesn't even, and lucky for him that it took really educated people to understand that, because he would have been dead as soon as anybody saw that book. So he was, he was in the abbey of a monastery. He was a monk, a Catholic official in the Catholic Church. So he had to be careful about that. But he did mathematically demonstrate some important things. The Earth spinning on its axis. He understood this from years of observations of the heavens and the fact that he was a brilliant mathematician. The Earth was circling the sun. The sun was not circling the Earth. The Earth was circling the sun. And other things. So, but you know, what does that mean to anybody? So Magellan demonstrates that the Earth is a globe, which only means anything to a certain few people. Copernicus demonstrates that we are spinning and we are not the center of the universe, but we're spinning, we're circling the sun. And this is all line upon line, precept upon precept. It's taking a while for this all to come to fruition. Check my time here. When do I okay, all right, let's not mess it up here. I talk too much. Next thing that happened, all right, Galileo. Remember Galileo? Galileo Galilei, that's his last name. Galileo was a brilliant guy. He was one of these rebellious type guys that didn't believe. He was very smart. He was a polymath, you'd say. He was just into everything. He was a physician, a physicist, a scientist, you know, an astronomer, and he was kind of a cantankerous, rebellious guy. And he learned that the Dutch had this invention called a telescope. They used it for, you know, for sailing. He got his hands on some. He modified them so that they were like 8 and 9 power, and you could look at the sky with them. And in 1610, this is all, you know, this is over a period of a century we're talking about. He's watching Jupiter. He's watching Jupiter, and he sees these little dots, which four little bright dots, and he's watching over days. And he realizes these are moons. Jupiter has moons that are going around. The moons of Jupiter. You know, Copernicus was a champion of heliocentricity. In other words, the fact that the sun was at the center and not the Earth. But he was a popular guy. The papacy, they were angry with him, but they didn't really dare touch him because he was popular. So they censured him. They made him come in and recant. And everybody knew it was a joke because they knew why he was doing it. You had to go in officially and say, all right, you know, the sun's not really century. The Earth is really, and everybody's like, yeah, okay. But he did that. And they put him under house arrest. So he didn't have to like give up his life, but it was tough for him. But he was just one of those guys that they had to deal with him that way. Strangely, when we were on vacation in Italy, which is museum Florence, still with museums, and they have one of Galileo's fingers under a glass thing there, and it's Galileo's middle finger. And this is kind of an ironic thing, like this is supposed to be his eternal response to papacy, I guess. I don't know. They got the thing there in the glass, little glass bulb thing. It's probably 16 or 18 tall. All right, so over a period of more than a century, with one line of evidence after another accruing to the world of mankind, because the Lord is turning on the spigot of knowledge, we learn that the Earth is not flat. We're on a globe that's spinning on its axis. We're going around the sun. There's other heavenly bodies that do that in this system with us. That takes a long time. Even today, there's flat Earth people. They have conventions. And they believe that the Earth is flat. So let's talk about something that's happening now, which is, again, precept upon precept, line upon line. And here's the start. I have 10 minutes. All right. Here it is. 1912 through 1925, American astronomer Vesto Slipher is engaged in an undertaking where he is examining the planet trying to find out what their rotational periods are and what are their atmospheres like and so forth. And he's using spectroscopy, looking at light, because that's, you can learn things by spectroscopy. You can't learn by looking through a telescope. This is what he learned. He says, all of the stuff that we're looking at out there, the stars and the nebula, he thought anything that was not a distinct star in the distance was a gas, nebula. And he noticed that because he's looking at light, everything he's doing is spectroscopy. And he makes notes that the stuff that's out there, the stars and the nebula, all seems to be like the light is in the red shift area. It's like stretched out. It's kind of like moving away from it. And that, who knows what that means? He doesn't. Now, in 1924, someone whose name you'll recognize, his name is Edwin Hubble, Hubble telescope. He's doing something completely different in California at Mount Wilson Observatory. They have a new device, 100-inch reflective telescope. And you can see really super vivid. It's way up high in the mountain top. And what he's doing is he's looking at the stars and trying to gauge distances by using comparative luminosity and other, and sometimes even triangulation. And he learns that these things that slightly think as nebula or gas is actually distant galaxies. And so he tries to decide how far away things are by looking at them through a telescope. Right? So that's another thing. These guys probably don't even know each other. So here's a third, this is line upon line we're talking here, okay? Here's a third thing. We're learning from the book of God's handiwork, which is being revealed to us slowly, like truth about the scriptures. There's a fellow by the name of George Lamarck. He's a Belgian physicist. And for whatever reason, I don't know what his work was exactly, but he gets these two sets of data, right? The guy who looked at how red things were and where they were, and the guy who knows how far away those things are, and he does this with them. And he's like, wow, look at this. This is stuff that's farther away is more red than the stuff that's closer. And it begins to dawn on everybody that the stars and the galaxies are doing this. They're moving apart from each other. Now, if you play that tape backwards and stop the video and move it backwards, you know what happens, right? Boom. So, Mr. Albert Einstein, with whom we are all familiar, is working at the same time, separately, of course, on this theory of gravity. So I have 6 minutes, right? General theory of relativity, dealing with gravity, not special relativity with light, general relativity with gravity. And Mr. Einstein's math, which is amazingly good, shows him that something that he doesn't like, which is that gravity apparently should be making everything crash back together. So he does something that he regrets with it. He installs a phony number, a made-up number in his equation. He calls it the cosmological constant, because he wants a steady-state universe, not one that's expanding or shrinking. So he makes up this number called the cosmological constant. Okay, so his equation works now, except for this. Einstein and Schleifer, Lemaitre, the guy that figured out, the guy that has both sets of data, they wind up in a taxi cab together in Bonn during a convention. And Lemaitre tells Einstein about the redshift idea. And Einstein's like, okay. So Einstein, this is 1931 now. He's got to travel from Europe. He travels from Europe and goes all the way to California to meet with Hubble at Mount Wilson Observatory and to see for himself all the data. And then, to his credit, this is Albert Einstein, right? Everybody bows before Albert Einstein. He says, that was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life, saying to say there was a cosmological. I was wrong. So this whole thing leads us to words at the beginning of Genesis, because even though everybody is not on board with this stuff, we see where this is going. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Some of my mentors in the truth had this idea that meant that God ordered things that already existed or whatever. I had a conversation with somebody that many of you know about this, but that's not what the scripture says. The scripture says God created. Now, this is a problem if you want to be an atheist, because nature was at one time did not exist. The natural world that we see around us, what could cause it? The cause would be something outside of nature, superior to nature, supernatural. When people who are smart physicists, astronomers, cosmologists learn about all the very carefully knife-edge stacking of all the things that we learn about the universe today, the weak and strong force, the strength of gravity, electromagnetism, and how exquisitely delicate the balances are. They start talking about, as a way out, they start postulating there must be other universes. That's where that talk comes from. You hear people talking about multiple universes, not a shred of scientific evidence to create any kind of a discussion on it. It's totally an escape hatch for people that are smart and understand the laws of physics and what's going on in the universe, but they don't believe in God, or they're atheists or whatever. That's where multiple universe discussion comes from, not from any factoid of any kind. So we're learning about the scriptures as we move through time. The word's not heard. We're learning about God's work, the book of his work. Also, as he doles out information. This James Webb telescope that's going up now is going to be a total mind blow. People, you think that the Hubble field photographs are incomprehensible. You ain't seen nothing yet. That's my prediction. So it's an amazing universe, everything about it. We're going to have plenty of time to be thrilled about everything if we do what we know we need to do in our personal development. So may the Lord add us.